An Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reboot would be good for the MCU. Hi, I'm Jordan the Nerd of Gold, and we know that after Secret Wars, we're going to get some kind of soft reboots, reset, whatever word you want to use for it. There are going to be changes to what is and isn't canon in the MCU after Secret Wars. And I think the idea of a reboot for the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a good idea for the MCU, because while it doesn't have to be the same kind of show that it was beforehand, it can be a good way to centralize a lot of characters who may not make it to the big screen because of the prioritization of other characters in the films, and characters that maybe are good villains but not necessarily going to be good for the movies or make it into the movies. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. can be the show that kind of brings everything together that isn't in its own show, basically. So you can have the original Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cast of characters, maybe not the same actors depending on how they want to handle the reboot era and depending on where the actors are in their own life. I can see some of the actors coming back and some of them not. It just really depends on how they want to do that, and I wouldn't blame them one way or the other. But I think as a cast of characters, you can have them back there. They can go on little mini arcs that are maybe 3 to 5 episodes depending on how big the season is, and each of these can focus on things that are thematically relevant to whatever movies are being released that year while telling their own story, because they're not trying to step on the same toes as the movies, and they're not trying to tie directly in. They're trying to reinforce different themes while telling their own stories. And we can just focus on the helicarrier being basically like a starship in Star Trek, because it's going to be a central location for them to be on, and that's where a lot of scenes are going to be filmed. You can have your little away missions where they go down and actually do stuff in the real world, whatever city, and this ship can go wherever it needs to because it's a helicarrier. It can be literally wherever it needs to be. So you can do stories with like lower level mutant characters as the mutant saga gets involved. You can do things with like the Children of Humanity, their relationship with Hydra, because Hydra coming back could be a real thing. And you can deal with the idea of the infiltration into institutions like S.H.I.E.L.D. and how this affects the relationship between government institutions and mutants and otherwise superhumans going on in the world. And you can do different things like how different factions deal with these rising superpowers across the world. And I think that would be a great way to centralize characters and bring them back, like Cloak and Dagger, the Runaways. You can bring them back under the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. doing little different arcs there. Maybe Ghost Rider does get his own film in the MCU, but he appeared first in the MCU in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because until I'm told otherwise by Kevin Feige himself, I'm going to continue to assume that it is canon, despite the fact that the movies have never really addressed it. Just because they haven't addressed it doesn't mean it's not canon. That's a weird argument to make, in my opinion. So, like, until Kevin himself says so, I'm going to assume it's true. So, Ghost Rider did show up there, and that was a great arc. Season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a great season of television because it focuses on these little arcs that culminate into a season finale that works really well. And I think that's a spirit that they need to bring over to this new edition of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reboot, is focusing on these little arcs that, again, are telling their own stories that are thematically related to, but not narrative related to, whatever movies are being released that year. So that way, again, they can reinforce whatever ideas that are going to be out there in the MCU and focus on telling their own stories. Because at the end of the day, whenever you watch a project, whether it's a movie or a TV show, you should be able to enjoy that movie or TV show by itself, and you should be rewarded for noticing the links, either thematically or narratively, between any projects in the MCU, and that's how they should handle things. But let me know, would you watch an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. story where they treat a helicarrier more like a starship on Star Trek, where they just go where they're needed to and focus on little arcs? Is that something you'd want, or do you just think the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should be left in the past?